The special mention goes to Russia for fair enough Russia's past, our present, for showcasing the contemporary language of commercialization of architecture.
Это было отрежиссированное вступление.
That was pre-directed intro so that I would remind you that the result of our work was this prize that we got, that the Strelka Institute got for making the exposition in Russian Pavilion in Venice. We decided to start with a brief presentation for those of you who is not really aware of what was happening there and how things happened the way they did. Please raise your hands if you were there, by the way. Okay, then we should tell about it. Ivan, how about you sit on the first row? There's a seat for you there. So, that's why we shall make a brief presentation that we did 2 or 3 million times before when we have been telling about what's going to be in the pavilion. And after that, Anton will take the steering wheel and drive our discussion. So we'll take a look at the ideas that were presented back then at the pavilion and discuss it together with our remaining experts and the people who participated in the pavilion. And of course worked with us as well. So, the pavilion was titled Fair Enough, and this is the way it looked like. Back then, that's the venue. And we even had lines at the opening, because there were so many people who wanted to get in. That was pretty successful. The presentation is loading a bit slow. So that looked at the first sight a bit odd because everybody used to see the Russian pavilion something fancy, something festive, something outstanding, telling about the great country of Russia, but not that time. Maybe we were saying the same thing but with a different language, I don't know. So it all happened first and foremost because the subject that the main commissioner of the Biennale suggested, Rem Koolhaas back then, was suggested as observing modernity 1914-2014, and Rem Koolhaas asked every national pavilion to tell a story about what happened in every particular country with architecture and how architecture that was in the beginning of the century, Chinese, French, Russian, by the end of the century became universal, global, unilateral, homogeneous. That was his intellectual framework, and he requested us to react at his intellectual framework. And he was in a way right, because if you look at the trend, you can see it in Russia as well. But at the same time, we did realize that there's something contradicting his idea, some uniqueness, something special about our architecture, about our Russian environment. And that is why we can neither confirm nor deny his thesis. So, as a response, we have invented this kind of installation. In its shape and content, installation, as we believed, was telling about where architecture is in 2014. Where is it now? This is a format of commercial exposition. Of course, these kinds of exposition were promoting the idea of architecture, the ideas of architecture throughout the 20th century. And we saw this format as the way to promote the idea that we suggest. In addition, it also put together all of this variety that we wanted to present in a pavilion, all of these contradictions that are present in architecture today. In addition, thirdly, this also a universal language, international language, indeed international language, which offers to show. Back then, when we have been trying to figure out if we could contemplate about what architecture in Russia is like, we have constantly been thinking about exposition Art Moscow, Arch Moskva at VDNH. And you see there are carpets for sale, pavilions of distinguished architects, and it's all together. And it's been honest and frank to where we were back then. And this title, Fair Enough, could be interpreted differently. Because, first of all, there's this word fair, like an expo of fair, and it also means some terms of like, it's actually justified. So we saw this true, this truth and this fair, and we put it together, being honest and frank and sincere. And within this fair, we decided to present the best ideas that have been contemplated, conceived, devised in architecture in Russia in the 20th century. And as a result, we have modeled this total installation where we have imitated this real-life expo from VDNH. So we have this hanging ceiling, some panels, beautiful ladies in miniskirts that really were annoying to American feminists who seriously took Russian Pavilion, bringing models for the opening, earning extra points, etc., etc. So it actually worked provocatively as we expected, 100%. And here are the photos of the atmosphere, because in addition to the ideas presented, we also had people. We had people who were selling the ideas, presenting imaginary companies. All of the ideas were converted into imaginary companies with a style, with a branding, with a visual image. And a few of those salespeople are here with us tonight to take part in the discussion. So, of course, the process was exhausting, you see in the photo. And here are all of those companies that we invented. There were 20 of them. We're going to be talking about almost all of them tonight. You see all of this abundance of ideas and logos. Maria, amongst us here tonight, she made this colossal design work. She acted like one little design bureau. Every logo, of course, had a slogan to accompany it, a corporate style that was displayed in a design of so many kiosks, and every kiosk presumably was a separate company, a business with an idea, an enterprise. And beautiful people like Anna Bronovitska, an expert in modernism, worked as a salesperson at those kiosks to convey to the world and international community and sell those ideas to people coming in. And a few more shots. Again, all of the production that was required. I see the bag with the leaflets here to show you how we actually printed that. So if we wanted to put it all together, we needed to put so much work, research work, to actually put together those ideas, invent their modern function. And here is the list of experts who worked with us together back then, and some of them still work with us today. So this is the light intro to what we did back then. Another important point that I failed to mention. All of those 20 ideas that I presented, all of those 20 ideas were adapted for contemporary world. They were presented as though solving certain contemporary problems. Back then, of course, problems of architectural community, of the world, and we wanted to talk about that solution, function. It's only 5 years now since then, but we wanted to think about how those ideas can be relevant today. So can we actually sell those ideas today again? And who would be the buyer for those ideas? So we wanted to talk about that with one another, because we have not seen each other for quite a while, and we wanted to talk about that with our experts whom we have invited here. So let's watch the video, or you can say a few words about the thing. Yeah, let me warn you about the video, give you a heads up. Disclaimer: out of the terabytes of the content produced for the video, we had also an audio guide in 2 languages. We put it together at the last minute, and in Russian it was read by a well-known actor. Don't remember the name. Jinishvili. His idea is Jinishvili. You will recognize the voice. It's very recognizable. And it's inexplicably close to every single one of us. And the story, the narrative is built as though it's the guide to the real-life commercial fair. And it's telling you about different kinds of companies, businesses there, telling about the historic ideas. Vasya, please take a seat at the first row. Yes. So, it's telling about the historic idea that is the foundation for the company. So, we split it into a few sections. Yeah, we also wanted to talk about the entire thing. Yeah, the entire thing. I don't know. If I want to list all of the main issues that we face today, well, within those 5 years that passed, for 100 times I've been talking about the exposition. It's hard for me to tell about it again, because I'm facing the same problem again and again. Somebody sees it as a joke, as a wordplay, like a ha-ha, they made Soviet ideas and turned them into some kind of a joke. But it's not a calembour. It's not a jeu de mots, you know, it's not a quirk. It's based on a research. It's a long research, a result of research work. And many of these projects are implemented. Another important thing for contemporary architecture. It was an important thing for contemporary architecture back then. And again, this is the analysis of presentation of contemporary architecture back then. And that's how we come up with all of those imaginary companies. That was important. These are three significant aspects that we can discuss today and could discuss back then. And this is something that we could track within those 5 years, because some of the ideas in architecture are still relevant, even today. Some of the ideas have mutated. Some of the ideas became redundant. Or maybe some old ideas respond to the new challenges in a new way. Something may have changed in the way architecture ideas, and not only architecture ideas, are communicated today. So perhaps the format of that fair is not relevant even today again. Maybe we should have arranged a conference back then, or could take and host a conference today. I don't know. Take a microphone in a different hand. Is everything okay? Hold it closer. Okay.
Стараюсь справиться.
Whatever I said before, all of the things that I have mentioned just now are very important, and they're worth discussing right now. But we should have some foundation, and we should not discuss it out of the blue. So you should know about the content of the exhibition, because I see very few of you have actually been there. That's why we'll have to switch on the videos with a text and a certain set of images, and then we'll discuss them. We have split those videos into some not quite obvious groups, not quite obviously defined groups. Yeah, you'll have to look at us too. Anyway, no matter how we split them and separate them and subdivided them, not all 20 are here, but let's watch most of them right now. Okay, let's go.
Shaping Inspiration, книга, изданная специально для выставки Fair Enough. По следам обширного исследования русской авангардной, модернистской и постмодернистской архитектуры был создан каталог самых необычных и вдохновляющих архитектурных форм. Обращаясь к творчеству широкого круга авторов, включая Константина Мельникова, Леонида Павлова и Сергея Ткаченко, книга представляет собой обзор формальных изысканий 1920-х,
from 1920s, 1960s, and 1970s.
Опираясь на богатое архитектурное прошлое, Shaping Inspiration надеется послужить источником вдохновения для новых поколений архитекторов в России и за рубежом. Стенд украшен моделями каждой из представленных в книге форм, напечатанными на трехмерном принтере. Эстетика
LTD Aesthetics. LTD Aesthetics is a leading supplier of architectural elements for Russian and Neo-Russian style buildings. The production of the company is based on traditional motifs, which are characteristics for architecture of Russian province. Decorative elements and aesthetics of LTD are produced of all kinds of contemporary materials, and they are fitting for any kind of architectural objects, no matter what scale or construction it has. anything, from an apartment with empty walls till the glass-embodied skyscrapers. LTD aesthetics can make it a hallmark of proud and deeply Russian-in-spirit architecture. The stand presents the range of beautiful decorative elements completed by the video where you can see the project of the skyscraper in neo-Russian style, and it is juxtaposed to the other high-rise buildings which are indistinguishable from it. In the magazine of the stand you can find the brief history of Russian and neo-Russian architecture and also the description of the role that they played in building contemporary architecture of Russia. Shushev Architects
международная
is an
архитектурная
international
корпорация,
architecture
осуществляющая
corporation.
архитектурное
It does
проектирование,
architecture
дизайн
design,
интерьеров,
interior
исследование и
design,
разработку
research, and
комплексных
of course
планов
development of
развития
the
территорий
complement
для
of the urban
государственных и
design
частных
for
заказчиков.
public and private
Ее
clients.
деятельность
The
основывается на
activities are
творческом
based on
методе
the work
русского
of the creative
архитектора
approach
Алексея
of
Щусева,
Russian
удивительно
Soviet
гибкого мастера,
architecture.
на протяжении многих
Alexei
десятилетий,
Shushev. He's been a
создававшего
super
свои
flexible master
шедевры
who has been
без
creating his
оглядки на текущие политические и
masterpieces
эстетические
regardless
предпочтения.
of political
Бюро
and aesthetic
Shushev
currents.
Architects
Shushev
хранит
Architects
верность традициям
preserves
основателя и
faithfulness to
справедливо
the
гордится
traditions of
своей
its founder, and
способностью
it's proud of
возводить
its
внушающие
ability
уважение
to
здания
build
в любой
buildings
ситуации
that
для любого
inspire
заказчика,
respect for any
решая
client
любую
in any
задачу.
circumstances
На
for
экране
any task.
демонстрируется
On
короткий
the screen you
фильм,
can see a brief
созданный этой
video
воображаемой
created specifically
корпорацией,
by this
который
imaginary
рассказывает об
corporation that
истории
tells
компании
about
и
the history of the
представляет ее
company
кредо,
and presents its
философию
credo,
гибкости в
motto,
архитектуре.
philosophy,
Разрабатывая
flexibility in
концепцию
architecture.
Shushev
Developing the
Architects,
concept
мы
of Shushev
представляли
Architects, we
архитектурное бюро
imagined
21
architecture bureau of
века,
21st
которое
century
работает согласно
that
принципам
works according to
Алексея
the
Щусева,
principles of
задающим
Alexei
высочайшую
Shushev,
планку творческой
creating
свободы,
the
профессионализма
highest
и
benchmark
ответственности
of
перед
creative
обществом.
freedom,
Эти
professionalism, and
качества
social
позволяют
responsibility.
компании
These qualities
расти,
allow the company
развиваться
to
и
grow,
осваивать
develop,
новые рубежи,
and
ни в чем не поступая
discover
своими
new frontiers,
принципами.
never stepping
Такая
back,
модель
and
подходит для
never
архитектурных
sacrificing its
бюро,
principles.
которые после
This is the
смерти
model that
своего
fits for
прославленного
architecture bureaus
основателя
that even after the
стремятся
death
продолжить
of
его
its
дело без
distinguished
существенных
founder,
изменений
keep on
первоначальных
doing
принципов.
his
У стенда имеется второй этаж,
mission.
где можно
The stand has a
увидеть
second floor where
4
you can
рисунка
see
Щусева
four,
и общую панораму
sketches by
главного зала.
Shushev and a general panorama of the whole.
Долгое видео.
A long
Коллеги, если
video.
у вас есть что сказать, обязательно скажите.
Colleagues, if you have something to add, please do say something.
I think Brandon.
Я могу просто
I can
предложить
just
тем, что
preliminary
почему поставили
say that
первым.
we
Потому что
put
это
it
три
first because
первых
these are the
киоска, которые
three
встречали
first
зрителя.
kiosks
То есть у
that the
него
audience
с одной
saw.
стороны были вот модернистские
So
формы, с
first of
другой
all, it
стороны
was all
нью-русский
with the
декор, а
modernist
прямо
shapes,
перед
then
ним был
neo-Russian
уникальный,
decor,
уникальный,
and then
хороший,
after that,
снова
this unique,
беспринципный,
uncompromising Alexei
в
Shushev.
качестве людей, которые его концепцию представляли.
And we,
Это было
with the people who
кино,
presented the
это такое было
concept.
видео
So it was a
в стиле Apple на
video
белом
like
экране,
Apple on
когда
widescreen.
мы цитатами из Щусева объясняли его метод,
When
который
we
даже
quoted
сейчас
Shushev
вполне мог бы
explain his
Johnny
methodology,
Ive
and Johnny Ive could
проговаривать
just pronounce the
iPhone.
same thing today about iPhone, for example.
I think maybe I would speak in English shortly, but maybe Brandon, you can give your perspective on these three ideas because, I think what unites them and what is interesting for me is that they all are kind of export products. So it is what Russia is trying to export. Does it work? Still we can export it, or I think you don't think that somebody will buy it from outer world?
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm sorry that I'm speaking English. But I just want to say that Masha and Nastya made these videos, and they're really good. Don't you think? We had nothing to do with these videos at all, but they're really, in terms of expressing what we were trying to do with the exhibition, they're excellent. What I would say is just actually to follow up on what Anton said in terms of it not being a joke. Of course, it's partly a joke, but it's a joke that what we tried to do is really understand in a sympathetic way what the interesting, timeless, valuable idea is that all of these projects represent, regardless of what the regime was or what's happened historically or whether they were a success or whatever. we tried to find within them the thing that's eternal and valuable and kind of universally applicable. And then we combined it with contemporary commercial society. So, and even in that, we tried to be sympathetic to commercial society and what its intelligence is and what its kind of priorities are. So anyway, to answer your question, yeah, I think that they're all entirely valid because, you know, something like aesthetica, like, the reality is that we are all totally surrounded by architecture and aesthetics of all kinds, which are just grabbed together randomly from all these different time periods, all different cultures. And also, frankly, the way that architecture works, so many of the kind of technological elements are so standard that what you need is a superficial element on top to then claim it culturally or to give it some sort of distinguish it in the market. So I think that that's entirely valid. I think shaping inspiration is also valid because we are even more deeply entrenched in Instagram culture than we were even then, and that's pure surface and pure form and no thought whatsoever. And that's basically what that company was about. It was selling pure form and pure look. And sort of aesthetic and structure and form power, nothing to do with usability or anything like that. So basically, anyways, that's a very long way to say that yes, I think that they all still work for me. I mean, I'm not really objective, but still.
Yeah, I just want to ask if any of us, our experts or people that were there, also would like to add something. Like, do you think this idea is still relevant?
Should I speak English? Okay. Интересная была история, да, о том, что некоторые идеи, которые ребята придумали, ну, понятно, что все это было на основе исследования сделано, некоторые эти идеи, они потом стали еще более востребованными, что ли. Я на этой выставке рассказывал про этот дом на Тульской, большой, огромный бетонный дом, который был представлен как продукт компании, который производит бункеры, которые защищают от набегов, нашествий, террористических актов и так далее. Это был 14...
Он еще будет.
Да, он еще будет, но эта штука была в 2014 году, а дальше на юг Италии, вообще на юг Европы произошла вот эта история с мигрантами, там проблемы с безопасностью, и все это настолько было интересно. Это визионерская какая-то история, которая потом, ну, мне кажется, показала себя как какую-то более востребованную. Ко мне подходили карабинеры, спрашивали про этот продукт этой компании, то есть интересовались такими зданиями, которые более безопасные и защищены. И мне кажется, что если бы эту выставку провести в 2019 году, это было бы еще более так в точку ударило бы. Но это, наверное, больше имеет отношение к самому появлению.
Ну, отчасти ты прав. Интересно подумать, как из этого всего количества идей, там 17, какие мы действительно бы продали вот в 2019 году. Вот, и, ну, если говорить о тех вот этих трех, которые мы сейчас просмотрели, собственно, кажется, что все три по-прежнему релевантны, потому что есть история с каким-то таким, вот то, что Брэндон сказал, поверхностным украшательством, и в какой-то степени русская айдентика, она, ну, есть ощущение, что она все еще, даже еще не докручена, в том плане, что ее еще не так много продают, а можно уже гораздо больше, судя по той повестке, которая формируется вот сегодня среди всех нас, да, о том, что русская идентичность, как она должна быть подчеркнута. То есть в этом плане это какой-то идеальный, в чем-то циничный, в своей поверхностностью подход. Да. Другая история, ну, как бы про все, что произвел модернизм, и как модернизм в виде каких-то вот этих форм и каких-то объектов тоже пытается быть неким трендом и брендом и становится популярным. И вот этот вот формализм, который был, ну, в нашей истории достаточно сильно представлен благодаря Футемасу, да, он тоже по-прежнему востребован как некий продукт. Ну, а Щусев — это какая-то вечная история, про такого гибкого архитектора, который там на протяжении 100 лет или 200 лет или 300 лет может менять то, что он делает, и продукт, который он производит, в зависимости, собственно, от того, как меняется контекст и заказ. И этот как бы архитектор, ну, он среди нас, он в нас, он мы, и он как бы остается вместе с нами. И в этом смысле эти три, они как-то кажутся по-прежнему все еще дико актуальными.
Я понял свою функцию. Я буду рассказывать забавные истории, которые происходили на выставке и после нее. Про эти три как раз будки есть, три киоска, есть три классные истории, потому что вот это не очень понятно из видео, но про вот эти модернистские формы была сделана такая книга, которая раскладывалась во всех направлениях. И вот эти формы, которые были напечатаны, ну, они были сделаны в скетчапе, они как бы раскладывались, непонятно было, где у них вверх, где у них низ, где право, где лево, как бы такая вот хитрая, сложная книга, которая очень трудоемкая, она там в производстве, по-моему, стоила одну как бы вещь.
And it cost a lot to produce it. So, it was stolen at the very first day. We made a first few books there. So the first day was stolen, but it's still there for a few days. Sergei Nyabutov has it. He is not here, unfortunately, but he was there at the kiosk. Also, Irma Baum, an Italian designer, has one book, and also another third owner of the book is...
Печатным, как принтер офис, ну, типографии, которая ее производила, которая себе еще дополнительно, чтобы показывать.
So print office also stored a book as a design example of what they can do.
Вещи, которые мы продавали, русские архитектурные формы, она сейчас продает свои услуги. Вот.
So that company that designed the book now sells its services. Another story is about Estetica LTD. A month after the exhibition was opened in August at Strelka Institute, there was a call. A person called from Bavaria. He produced architecture moldings, and he said that I saw this thing at the exhibition, like this dude started making cool architectural moldings in Neo-Russian style. True story. And he asked for the contact for the company to buy a license. They said, dude, let it go. That was a kind of a con. If you want, we can send you 3Ds, but that was never marketed. Maybe that dude who called us was upset. Maybe we could actually sell him some stuff. I don't know. Anyway, the third story is about Shusev. It's about how Ram Kolkhas, the curator of Biennale, went to our pavilion, and I believe he spent about 20 minutes taking a look at that video where we displayed all of those videos and the quotes of Shusev about how important it is to conduct research, build multidisciplinary teams, and even after the death of the architecture, we should preserve the spirit of the architect. So Ram watched the video, he was both sad and inspired, I guess, I don't know, but probably he loved it. So he was inspired, or he felt that it was not his idea and he was upset. What is the story about him naturally? I don't know. Do we want to ask questions right away from the audience? Or we can do without questions or ask them later. Maybe something's urging and you want to ask the questions. If not, we can continue. So let's continue. Next video.
Лисицкий. Лисицкий – мультидисциплинарное дизайн-бюро, специализирующееся на проектировании и художественном оформлении утопических выставок. Основываясь на работах выдающегося русского дизайнера Эля Лисицкого, бюро развивает его наследие. Используя самые передовые технологии, компания вслед за Элем Лисицким создает трехмерное пространство, просвещающее и воодушевляющее зрителей. Работа бюро строится на утопических принципах. Пространства, созданные Лисицкий, не отображают реальность, как она есть, а создают представление об образе желаемого будущего, внушая
desired
зрителям
future,
стремление
inspiring
сообща
the audience with
добиваться
the
воплощения
aspiration
явленной на
to
выставке
embody
мечты.
the
Для того,
dream that
чтобы
is
перенести
presented,
проекты Эля Лисицкого в наши дни,
so that
мы
we
сопоставили
deliver
его
the
авторский
products
коллаж
of the
выставки
project of
«Пресса»
Lisinsky. Today we have
1926
put
года
his
и
exhibition from
новую
2026
визуализацию
with a
выставки
new
Google,
visualization
спроектированной
of
бюро
Google
Лисицким.
Expo designed by the
Советская
Lisinsky
экспозиция на
Bureau.
выставке «Пресса»
Soviet
была
exhibition
призвана
at the
прославить
Press
роль
Expo
печатных
of
изданий в
2026
повышении
was
грамотности
meant
населения
to
в первые годы
glorify
советской
the
власти.
function of printed
Амбиции
press
радикального
in the
преобразования,
first years of
характерные для
Soviet
Советского
power.
Союза, теперь присущи
So,
таким частным
the
компаниям,
principles
как
of
Google.
Soviet Union
Они
2026
коренным образом
is now
меняют наши
inherited by
способы
Google today
потребления
that
и
changes our
порождения
consumption
информации ради
habits
построения
and
нового
information
общества,
consumptions, mainly to build the
движимого
new kind of
цифровыми
society
данными.
moved by digital data.
Бюро, которое помогает
Bureau.
людям в изобретательстве и
It helps
инновационной
people
деятельности,
to
используя
create
конструктивный подход,
and
основанный на
invent using the
развитии
construction
фантазии.
approach based on
Из
fantasy.
книг Якова Черникова
From the
мы
books
вывели
of
так
Yakov
называемый метод
Chernikov, we have
Черникова,
driven the
который
so-called
гарантирует создание
Chernikov's
передовой
method that
архитектуры.
guarantees the creation
Его
of
системный
the
конструктивный
forefront
подход служит
architecture,
своего рода
systematic
прототипом
approach
для
was a
формул
prototype
творчества,
for the
которые
formulas
приобретают
of
все большую
creativity that
популярность в
have more
корпоративной
and
среде.
more
На стенде
appeal in
предлагается две
corporate
брошюры.
environment. There are two
Одна
brochures
—
that
это
stand. One of
воображаемое
them
интервью
is
с
the
самим
imaginary
Яковом
interview with
Черниковым, основанное
Yakov
на
Chernikov
фрагментах из его
himself,
трудов.
based
А
on
вторая
the,
— пример метода Черникова с
excerpts of his
набором
work.
правил для
Another is
разработки
examples
оригинальных
of Chernikov's method
архитектурных решений.
with the original architectural solutions.
Хидекель
Elements is a non-commercial organization that provides cheap and easy to build buildings for people who have to abandon their places of living as a result of wars or natural disasters. It's based on frame blocks, which is an open system of elements, which allows very quickly to create robust construction from
Изначально
available
рамоблок
materials.
был изобретен известным
Frame block was
советским
initially
художником
invented by
и
the
архитектором
well-known Russian
Лазарем
Soviet
Хидекелем.
architect and
Работая в годы
artist
Великой
Lazar
Отечественной войны в
Hidekel.
условиях крайней
During
спешки
the
и
Second
нехватки
World War, he
ресурсов,
had to work in a
Хидекель
condition of
предложил новый
scarcity of
строительный
resources. He
элемент,
suggested
который
new
позволял уменьшить
construction
расход
materials that
бетона
allowed
и дерева
to
без
decrease the use
ущерба для
of concrete
прочности
and wood
конструкции.
while keeping the
Мы
constructions as
доработали его
robust as they could
изобретение и
be. We
предлагаем
have
его в качестве
upgraded his
решения на
invention
случай
and suggested
стихийных
as a solution
бедствий.
for
По данным Международного
natural
центра
disasters.
мониторинга за
According to the
перемещениями,
International
в период с
Monitoring
2008
Center,
по
from the period
2012
of
год около 144 миллионов
2008-2014,
человек
about
в
144
125
million
странах
people in
мира были
125
вынуждены покинуть
countries
свое
all
место
around the world had
жительства.
to abandon their places of living.
Усовершенствование систем раннего
Through advancing
оповещения
the
и
systems
другие
of
меры по спасению
early
жизни
emergency
привели
information,
к снижению
notification,
катастрофического уровня смертности,
we could
тем
achieve
самым
the level
увеличив
of
число
death,
беженцев,
the death
остро
toll as a
нуждающихся
result
в
of
жилье.
a natural
Хидекель
emergency.
Elements
But
позволяет обеспечить
unfortunately, there's so
быстрое
much
строительство
refuge,
экологически
so that
безопасного
Hidekal
жилья
Elements can
для
provide
людей,
them
оставшихся
with
без
safe
крова,
and easy to
снижая
build
таким образом необходимость
shelters,
опасного и болезненного переселения.
so that
Применение
there's no need
технологии
to relegate
рамоблок
people. The
позволяет
frame
возводить
block
прочные
allows
конструкции
building
из
robust
подручных материалов.
constructions out of
На
available
стенде
handy
предлагается
materials. The
видеоролик,
stand also shows a video
демонстрирующий, каким образом
demonstrating how
систематические работы
systematic
Хидекеля
works of
превратились в
Hidekal
инновационную
could be
архитектурную
transferred into
технологию.
innovative architecture
К одной
technology.
из стен
One of
подвешен
the
готовый
walls
образец рамоблока, а рядом
show
выставлены
the
детали,
ready-made element of a
необходимые
frame
для
block
его сборки с
alongside
нуля.
with the details that are required to build the construction from the ground up. Smashing! I really love watching these videos
Но я
again.
тут
So,
дам свой какой-то
I'd like to
комментарий
give here
на,
my
собственно,
comment.
на все эти три
For all of
идеи,
these three
возвращаясь к главной
ideas,
теме, насколько
coming
это
back
все
to the main
актуально
subject of
и
how it is
проявляется
essential today,
сегодня.
critical for
Очевидно,
sale today.
что
Obviously,
история с быстро
this
возводимыми
thing with the
конструкциями,
easy to
которая
build,
бы
quickly constructions
решала
that
вопрос
could solve the problem of
беженцев
refugees
и
and their
стихийных
shelter,
бедствий,
especially
количество
after
которых сегодня
natural
растет.
disasters. And there are
Это
more and more people
по-прежнему
that need this
актуальная
kind of
тема.
shelter
У нее
today.
даже
I
появился
see this
сейчас,
is
наверное,
essential.
другой
I think
важный
there's another
аспект,
angle to it today, more
еще один
important.
важный тренд, что,
Another trend that,
скажем так,
example,
который можно назвать
we
как
could call
архитектура,
this
которая
certain
исчезает, не
architecture that
оставляет
vanishes
следов.
without a
То есть как
trace,
бы есть такая тенденция,
that
да,
doesn't
когда мы
leave a
строим
trace
дома, и
when it
мы уже
vanishes. Because we
закладываем
build buildings
идею
now and we
того, что
initially
она,
think
когда
that
будет
these
распадаться, когда
buildings could be
настанет ее
demolished one day
время, мы не
without
будем
leaving
тратить много
traces, so we will
ресурсов,
not
много
spend too much
средств на то, чтобы
resources
ее
and effort in order to
демонтировать, и что вот этот вот
dismantle
уход без
or
следа
demolish
это
the
такой
building.
же важный тренд, как ресайклинг
Leaving without a
мусора,
trace
там,
is just
как
important
низкая
as
эмиссия, и все вот
recycling or low
эти
emission today,
экологические тренды.
all
В
of the
какой-то
ecological
степени
trends that we have
мы
today.
даже
So
сами
to a
того
certain
не
extent,
зная,
without even knowing
заложили
it,
в эту
we
идею,
have
заложили
been
себе
at the
да,
beginning
что
of this
вот это
idea,
исчезновение без
tentacle,
следа
put this
из
idea
каких-то
of
4 деревяшек и бетона, это
demolishing
вполне
without
реальная
any
история,
trace.
что
So
он как
these
бы
4
может
pieces of
дальше
concrete,
продолжать
4
эту
pieces of
тему.
wood, we can continue this.
История про компанию,
The
которая
story about
делает выставочный дизайн.
the
Ну,
enterprise
мне
that
кажется,
makes
что вообще
exhibition
выставки
design,
сейчас в
well,
супертренде, и, может быть,
of
Брэндон
course,
чуть больше про это
exhibitions are
скажет, но
very
вообще,
trendy today.
по крайней мере,
Perhaps
для
Brandon will have some
Москвы
more to say
понятно,
about
что
this, but
выставка
obviously
как
for
такой двигатель
Moscow,
идей,
this
она
expo as the
чрезвычайно актуальна,
locomotive
и
of
архитекторы
ideas
даже
is still essential. And
сформировали некое
architects have even
направление,
put together
ну, такая,
certain
скажем, группа
trends.
архитекторов, которая
There's a group of
занимается
architects
выставками, это
that
вполне
do these kind of
актуальная
exhibitions, so it's
история.
still
И
important today.
Чернихов,
And
который
Chernikov
или, так
is,
скажем,
or
какой-то
even
творческий
some kind
метод,
of creative
который ложится
method
в основу
that is the
проектирования и
foundation for
создания идей,
design,
вот тут у меня, наверное, возникнет вопрос,
is in a way
потому
questionable.
что я не могу
Because
сказать,
I
что
could
на
not
сегодняшний
say
момент
that for
знаю
the time being I
много
know
архитекторов
many
или школ
architects or
архитектурных
schools,
или
architecture
дизайнерских,
schools or design
которые так
schools
артикулируют свои
would be
подходы,
able to
свои идеи в
articulate their
какую-то
approach
методологию,
so
как это
clearly in the
делали в
shape of
20
methodology,
веке,
the
как это
way
делал
the
Чернихов, как это
masters of
опять-таки делал
the 20th
Кутемас и так
century used
далее.
to do
И
it,
здесь,
like
может быть, это
Chernikov,
как раз
like
тоже поле
Kutемaz.
какой-то дискуссии, потому что
And I
мне
believe
кажется,
here we have a field for
что
discussion because
это то, что
I believe
это то, что
this
скорее стало
ability
как-то
to put together
индивидуально и
ideas
принадлежит каждому,
have
чем
individualized.
носит
This
какой-то такой общий
idea
характер
generation or
методологии.
methodology is more individual. It belongs
Коллеги?
to every single individual. What do you think, colleagues?
Yeah, I just totally agree with that, and basically say what I can add, since fair enough, is that now I'm living in Dubai, and I'm making a museum there, which is basically built on the legacy of what Elisitsky was doing, in particularly this Pressa exhibition in Cologne that we showed some photos of. The brilliance of what he did is that he figured out a way to communicate the possibility of technology, the possibility of political policy, the possibility of social policy in a language which transcended reading. And that was a time when a lot of people couldn't read, and now we're in a time when people don't read. So you actually still need to be able to do that, and you need a language which transcends newspapers, magazines, white papers, even presentations. You need something which is immersive, which is physical, which engages all of your senses, and which is somehow inspiring and puts you at the center of a narrative that could deliver you into the future. This is literally the museum that I'm making at the moment, and it's exactly coming from that. So I would say that I couldn't possibly express how still relevant that is. The other thing I'll say about Dubai is that, and this actually relates to Aesthetica Limited too, but also Chernikov, it's a place that basically has built itself up from nothing in about 50 years. It's not a place like Russia with very deep cultural traditions, artistic traditions, architectural traditions. It's a place that basically has been generated by the free market. And as a result, it's constantly kind of intelligence gathering, and it's constantly trying to search out who can do something amazing there and do something new there. And in that kind of culture, and particularly the way that sort of decision makers think, when they're busy and when they don't have a lot of experience in something, they just basically Google like best architect in the world. And then they get like a list of those things, and then they approach. And so something like Chernikov or something like anything which is basically branded on a signature of a kind of brilliant person, living or dead, is actually the way that a lot of decision makers decide who's going to build not only a building, but an entire district. So the fact that we sort of tried to make it clear that these things, these not only ideas, but the personalities behind them remain persuasive and remain valuable in a kind of intellectual property way, I think is very much still the case, and would be really financially successful right now, actually.
I don't have that much to say about the destiny of these kiosks.
расскажу
I
о
just
том,
wanted
кого вы
to
видели
tell about
стоящим
what you
в
have seen
киоске
standing in
Хидекель
the
Elements. Это был
Hiddekel
Роман
Elements
Хидекель, внук
kiosk. That was
Лазаря
Roman
Хидекеля,
Hiddekel,
который
the
придумал
grandson
этот,
of Lazar Hiddekel, who invented
этот
that
ромоблок.
particular frame
Плюс
block.
к тому,
In
этот
addition,
ромоблок
that
был
frame
впервые
block
сделан
was
с
first
40-х
made
годов, и сделан
since
он был
40s, and
застройщиком
it's
нашей выставки.
been made
Это
by
была
the
немецкая
developer of our
компания,
exhibition. That
а
was a
придуман
construction
ромоблок
company,
был
German
из-за
company, but
того,
the
что
frame block was
немцы
invented
напали
because
на
the
Советский
Germans
Союз.
attacked
Это
the
была
Soviet Union,
определенная
attacked
ирония
Soviet
в
Union.
этом
So
смысле.
kind of had
И
we had
третья
the
история про этот киоск, это то,
subcontractor
что там
who
действительно
built
было
our
видео довольно
exhibition that was
смешное
from
про то,
Germany,
как
and the
супрематические
construction blog
композиции
was promoted
пространственные
by the
Хидекеля
Germans.
превращались в этот
And
ромоблок.
interesting how
Как такая
suprematist spaces of Hiddekel were
magic.
magically
Вот.
transferring
И
into
там были
this
эти
frame
смешные
blocks.
подписи
And
типа
there were these fine
supremacism for
signatures like
humanity и
suprematism
так
for
далее. Так
humanity,
вот,
etc.
это видео
So that video
демонстрировалось на выставке в
was
Русском музее
demonstrated in the Russian
Лазаря
Museum
Хидекеля в
of
прошлом году.
Lazar
Вот.
Hiddekel
Она, конечно, была
last
не в самом
year.
вот русском музее и даже не в корпусе Бенуа, а в
Not even in
Шереметьевском дворце,
Benoit building,
я
but in the
видел ее,
Sheremetyev
они там,
Palace.
меня
I
как
saw
раз
it,
его потомки запросили, я им прислал, и оно было выставлено прямо в экспозиции как абсолютно серьезная вещь. Я не знаю, как они, в каком тексте они смогли объяснить, какого черта эта вещь здесь делает,
I don't know in which
но
context they were able to
она там была.
explain the
Спасибо.
presence of the subject, but it was
Я
there.
не знаю, кто-нибудь из наших
I don't know,
экспертов
any of the
готов, потому что я знаю,
experts
что
wants to
оставшиеся
comment,
эксперты,
because I know
они
that the remaining
представляли другие
experts
темы, но,
presented
может быть, у
other
вас есть
subjects, but
какое-то
maybe you
свое
have
личное
something to say from your
наблюдение,
personal
личный опыт,
observation,
который вы можете
personal
сказать, что
experience that you
вот
wanted
эти
to
истории,
share,
они
because
все
these
еще
stories
актуальны
are still
и могут
essential
жить.
and could still live.
О, Маша, чудесно.
Maria, fascinating.
Спасла.
You are our savior.
Говорить?
Говорю. Я хочу добавить не про эти три киоска, про которые вы рассказали, а про один, который не вошел просто в эту подборку, но, очевидно, должен стоять там рядом. Был киоск, посвященный Хутемасу, переосмысленный, ну, как бы, эту методологию взяли и предложили дизайнерам отвлечься от их компьютеров, планшетов, телефонов и так далее, и вернуться немножко к физической реальности. То, о чем Брэндон тоже сказал,
said about the value of material inspiration.
Ну, вот мне как дизайнеру, когда пересматривала материалы перед этой дискуссией, мне казалось, что это действительно очень актуальная какая-то вещь, которая трогает сейчас, и то, что там была представлена возможность подойти, полепить из глины,
and actually mold something from clay, and realize that you can not only actually design stuff in 3D on your screen, but also can mold and work with different kinds of mediums. I believe it's an important reminder even for today that you can work in a material world as well. So, the slogan there was physical training for digital world, and I believe that is still very relevant today, extremely relevant today, because the more we indulge ourselves into this digital world, the less we have this manual practices, hands-on practices, things related to mindfulness, and attempt to look within you through body practices as well. This is super trendy, and at a certain point of time should come back to architecture schools as well. Yes, because you design 3D world, but even the book, it's 3D, and it would be odd to design it just looking through slides on your screen without feeling any volume, movement.
Спасибо.
Thank you, Masha, for reminding about Hutemas, because I believe that reveals a broad subject of this discussion about how our exhibition would look like if we were to do it today. And I have this hypothesis. I will talk about it in more detail later. The hypothesis is that this would not be 20 separate kiosks of 20 separate campaigns or startups. That would be 3 or 4, even 2 or 3 big blocks, like consortiums, when one company bought another company or branched into a different company and founded a different company. We would reinvent this entire mythology. Chernikov Creative Solutions, for example, would open Hutemas training, or Lisitsky, for example, would found courses for 3D physical modeling to make these exhibitions, entertainment workshops, edutainments, etc. What do you think? Who would consume whom? That's a difficult question. Need to think about it.
I don't know who consumed whom, but I know exactly what example I would use in order for us to make the new companies, which is this creative agency called Q, which is basically this monster conglomerate, basically, that like IDEO is part of, Sidley, the branding agency, is part of. They own interior design companies, and they basically just like pinball clients back and forth between each other. And they go like, you know, obviously if you're going to have a building, then you're going to need some branding for that. And then you're going to need to know how to make it user-focused and human-centric, and IDEO can do that. And they just kind of like have a pure, a total kind of corporate creative monster. And I think basically that's what I would model anything like that after, is these companies that basically just figure out every single component of what requires design or what requires something like creativity, and then they just collect them all in a single like conglomerate, basically.
Yes, I believe that within those 5 years, one of these companies, these creative bureaus, have actually come up with the idea to have this avant-garde term as part of something very propagated. This Russian avant-garde has become a name of the term. It would be huge conglomerate called Russian avant-garde, selling all kinds of designs, constructivist, anti-constructivist, because Chernikov was anti-constructivist, and that's super cool as well. So there could be so many different kiosks in there. Shall we move on? Yes, let's move on. If somebody have questions or comments, or you disagree, radically disagree, or you want to complain, or you have grievances, so let's move on.
Moscow Metro Worldwide.
Moscow Metro Worldwide. Moscow Metro Worldwide. Interdisciplinary Design Bureau, creating interiors for the stations of Russian subway. Also, it creates pieces of art and interior designs for educational venues, based on the examples and the hallmarks of the socialist art from Moscow undergrad. Moscow Metro Worldwide suggests to the cities globally design solutions that inspire and bring up, educate visitors, glorifying cultural and corporate values, sports and industrial and military achievements of science and fine art. The stands look like designs from Moscow Underground. At the circular ceilings, there are the ranges of symbolic themes from different cities of the world, reminding vitrages from Novoslobodskaya subway station in Moscow. Like in Moscow, these images express social ideals, suggesting to the city beautiful, glorified and inspiring images. Young Pioneer Palace Atelier. Young Pioneers Palace Atelier is the architectural bureau specializing in designing and programming socialist youth centers, IPA, inspired with the traditions of the pioneer movement. In the 17 years, all of the Soviet pioneer organization was the most successful socialist youth organization in the world. It responded. It was in charge of bringing up future citizens, civilians. It was building up their body and spirit, developed them from different angles, making them patriots and team players. The mission of the Young Pioneers Palace Atelier was to rethink that legacy for the new age. The motto of the IPA, enlightenment instead of entertainment. So the company suggested its own modernist architecture as an alternative for consumerist approach to youth culture that are embodied by the Disneyland palaces at the central wall of the palace. As a portfolio of the company, there were a few pioneer palaces built in 1960. On this wall, there are 4 principles defining the determinations of this architecture. The drawings of young children, contemporary children who draw on these pioneer houses confirm that the palaces inspired the fantasy. The Russian Council for Retroactive Development
Вымышленная международная культурная
The imaginary international cultural organization with the objective to restore the lost architectural and urban design values so that the cities are healed from the traumas of the modernism and modernization. The activities of the council are based on the ideas and works of Boris Yeremin, a well-known professor of the Moscow Architecture Institute. In 1980s and 90s, Yeremin made a few attempts to define the strategy of urban development of Moscow, tying it to the past of the city. The motto of retro development, Yeremin and his disciples had a few suggestions to restore certain constructions and social public spaces in Moscow and even entire blocks of Moscow. At the stand, you can see 3 really restored Russian objects and 3 designs of retroactive development of Paris, Berlin, and New York. Financial Solutions.
Financial Solutions.
Financial Solutions, consulting agency for real estate, specializing in very meticulous demolition of the architectural monuments for further restoration with contemporary materials and conveniences. The fundamental for the center were 2 very controversial Moscow projects: Vozdvizhenka Center, first known as Voyentorg Shops, and Moscow Hotel, Moskva Hotel. Initial buildings were demolished and replaced with the new ones, reminding the initial building, but bigger. Same but bigger, same but better. Financial Solutions has justification system to justify its approach, which is a counterweight to the common image of cultural heritage. The stand is a negotiation room designed by the photos of Voyentorg and Moscow Hotel, and also with the model of the recontemplated and bigger Shukhov Tower, the construction that made such a strong influence on contemporary architecture. This construction is still present, but now is under the threat of being demolished.
Спасибо. Да, ну как-то судя по реакции даже зала.
So according to your reaction, we may see that these ideas have certain success, potential success. For me, these ideas are split into a few groups. If first last 2, this Council for Retroactive Development and Financial Solutions is some sort of spooky recent future that actually happened. The Pioneer Palace in the underground is something that has not been yet fully implemented, but has this frightening potential. On the one hand, the potential to use monumental language as a way to propagate, as a tool for propaganda, and propaganda always has certain negative connotations. We understand this movement of youth organization in the last 5 years, for example, in Russia, could have been using this modernist language, the language of monumental shapes to propagate its ideas, but for some reason it has not happened yet. And I don't know how beautiful it will be. I know that beautiful isn't quite a modernistic word, but those objects could be very impressive. Same could be said about the underground, which use this monumental language, glorifying daily life and daily joy. Yet, having this character of propaganda, which we can hear more and more often today on TV. So these 4 on the one hand, and the other 2 that represent our recent past, well, here probably I have a feeling that perhaps, to a certain extent, it's good that they have remained in the past, because if we continue with this logic without knowing Shukhov Tower, there are no radical precedents, or at least I could not think about any today, to demolish something and then rebuild it back, because we need some sort of advantages. The same but better, you saw the slogan.
эти вещи отмерли,
So
так же,
these
как
things are
идея того, что нам
gone,
надо восстановить
same as
что-то, что мы
ideas that we
безнадежно
need to
утратили.
restore
А
something
вот эти две,
hopelessly
которые
lost.
первые, вот
But the
кажется,
two
что
ideas
они
that are the
даже несут в
first,
себе
I believe
какую-то
they
угрозу. Ну, не знаю,
bear a
согласятся
certain
коллеги
threat.
или
I
нет.
don't know whether my colleagues would agree.
Я могу.
Let me say about, I don't have any funny stories about those kiosks, only that today there's practically no, we don't have here today Anna Branovitskaya, who is a fabulous person, and she fabulously were delivering the notion of modernism, telling about those palaces, pioneer palaces, back at the kiosk. Masha Vadeyeva is not here as well, I guess. She was telling about those underground and Ostrogorsky about retractive development. He's not here as well, but there was a beautiful story that
Let me tell the story.
we had a counselor.
I will say one thing about that relates to retroactive development and to this idea of heritage. That Biennale, Phyllis Lambert was given the honorary Golden Lion for.
Brandon, you took
sorry.
closer. Like,
Sorry. Philip Lambert was given. Philip Lambert is I think the granddaughter of Mies. No, sorry, the granddaughter of the person who commissioned Mies to do the Seagram's building in New York. So she's a great advocate of modern architecture, a great friend of people like Rem Koolhaas. Anyway, she came to our exhibition and was absolutely furious about what we had done related to financial solutions, about recreating buildings that have been destroyed and then they made the same but better, or suggesting that things which have been demolished can be rebuilt or whatever. So I would just say, for us, we were totally fine with that, and the purpose of the show was to provoke people and to make people think about the way that things actually happen, not the way that they ideally would happen. But anyway, I just remember after that award ceremony that we showed, she came in and she kind of said, like, yeah, but it's your job to stop that from happening. And we said, well, no, our job is to make an interesting exhibition, and that's what we tried to do. So, I think it's also important to say that these things are not meant to be cynical or passive, but they're just trying to call attention to things as they actually work. And if we're upset by those things or outraged by them, then obviously we have to try to interact with them in one way or another. But the first step is to acknowledge them, and I felt like where she was coming from was a kind of utopian fantasy where we're going to all get together tonight and save a building that we love or whatever. So anyway, that's all.
Так вот, я, собирался, рассказать про то, как
I was going to tell about how Grigoryan came to Ostrogorsky and told him about Boris Yeremin more than Ostrogorsky used to know, being a representative of organization, because Grigoryan was a student of Yeremin and he had so many memories. But all of these things were under the pressure because one of the representatives of these respectable companies is actually here with us. That's the representative of Financial Solutions, Vasily Elzan. Please welcome. Oh, thank you, friends. The most controversial person. Look at his face. I don't have that golden watch. I had this rich, expensive watch. I would like to thank people on stage for this beautiful experience. That was so much fun. And I wanted to be persuasive back then. I even sold this idea to a few people, if I'm not mistaken. There were some Ukrainian investors who wanted to invest. Some other people who seriously were curious about the ideas to demolish something and put together back again. I've been thinking about that. If those things happen today, would it be worthy to actually talk about the matter? I'd say probably not. 5 years back again, there was this tension back then. Now the tension, the nerve is lacking. Maybe today because there is some inertia. And I believe that They do demolish buildings and build things back again, same thing, not even trying to act like it's the same. And when you say that there were these provoking precedents since then, actually there were I cannot recall any. There's also some kind of positive side here, why this is no longer at the bleeding edge. The way it used to be 5 or 10 years ago. There was this feeling that whatever they do with Moscow, it's bad. And demolishing buildings, when they demolished all buildings, was like the most explicit expression of this bad happening to Moscow. But ever since then, excuse me, thanks to your suffering and effort, Moscow has become fancy. And I'm saying this without any joke. I love the center of the city. So many things happened, so many things changed so significantly, because it would be odd to weep and yell. The agenda changed without scandals, but the agenda has become grand and positive. Let me repeat it once more. I think this kind of story would not be as resonant today. And thanks again for this experience. It was fun, and it's a pleasure to recall. Thank you, Vasily. So why is it important to remember? Because we one of the few countries where architects, and not only architects, have this conceptualized. Why we had Shukhov Tower there on the table? Because there was a grand discussion back then with real ideas to demolish the tower. They were actually suggesting to put it apart and put it back together again, making it only better, but somewhere far at the outskirts of Moscow. While we have it in the center, but we have been able to protect it back then, thanks to probably civil society or unity of the civil society. But there were people who seriously wanted to dismantle it and move it. And another house at Vozvizhenka Street, Nikitskaya Street, yes, at Nikitskaya Street. Out there, you know what I'm talking about. So again, it did not happen. I mean, the demolishing. So something has changed. Indeed, you're right. Which actually is a joy. Yes. On the other hand, they burned the churches, not only in Moscow.
Okay. Ну что, смотрим дальше?
All right, shall we watch another video? Yeah, the last section. While we were sitting here, I actually realized that we have forgotten to include one video into this group. It will be with the last set. It's a surprise. What could be there? Prefab Core, an imaginary company that was made as an alliance of all of the producers, the panel buildings, into one unified monopoly that provides any services regarding mass housing. Prefab Corporation takes charge of the entire cycle of construction, design, production, exploitation, operation, and demolishing of buildings in any scale. It analyzes territories, finds investors, designs, produces materials, arranges transportation of materials, and of course does the actual construction turnkey. In addition, media department, Prefab Corps, develops marketing and advertising campaigns to promote the project. Part of the corporation, of course, are businesses that provide additional services for cosmetic, repairing, exploitation, and security of the complexes. The spinning wheel in the table of the stand provides the opportunity to study the services of the company in detail, integrated both vertically and horizontally. From different angles of the stand, we see two large mosaics looking at one another, showing family and construction workers. These images propagate the panel buildings of the 60s. This mosaic show the photos of the panels are made of the photos of the panel high-rise buildings from all around Russia. One of the walls also depicts secondary use of construction panels. This is fully self-sufficient logistical and construction chain based on the maximal recyclability of the details of the demolished buildings. It could only be possible in the condition of the absolute synergy of one great monopoly. Narkomfin, an innovation architectural solution for co-living, co-working, and co-leisure time. It can be mass reproduced in any quantity and scale. Of course, commune Narkomfin house is the foundation for the company. This experimental complex strongly influenced the further development of architecture. The prototype of Narkomfin was built in 1928, created by Moisei Ginsburg, the well-known constructivist architect. This project is the hallmark for the future. It was a trial, a sample for future mass production construction in Russia. We have modified this concept to show 4 models of co-living based on the specifics of the initial project. This recreational complex based on the Narkomfin buildings connects the complex to the urban fabric, showing the unique combination of isolated public and private spaces. The prison for the underage criminals, again, predefines the living condition of the residents. And this building, the communal building, shows Ginsburg's projects the way they were initially devised but never built. Arkstroy is the architectural fantasy based on the building on Tuzskaya Street, built for the Ministry of the Nuclear Energy of Russia. It was designed at the peak of the Cold War. The building stands out with its robustness and size. It was built on the same concrete as the dams of the hydroelectric stations. And of course, the building is as long as 400 meters and as high as 50 meters. It can host up to 50 families. It's super robust. This ship building in the shape of the ship, Arkstroy suggests the Noah Ark construction concept. This is the on-ground vault that can withstand both divine powers and the war and the disasters of the nature. So it faces the threats of the 21st century. There's also the broad panorama of all of the apocalypse cases, highlighting the protective functions of the building. Dacha Coop. The idea of the business built around the phenomenon of dacha. The summer or all year long building, usually situated outside of the city. Back in the Soviet era, people could build and decorate their dachas on their own. They could do some gardening there, or even grow some crops for sale. Still, dacha is super important today. This is a quiet resort for the residents of the city. This is a place where you can store all of your old stuff, old junk. It's in a way a storage, a personal storage, same as renting a unit to store your unneeded extra junk. The key difference is that dacha also functions as a residential place, so that the hosts can design it for their own needs and live there in the calm of their old junk. So you don't have to actually put it in some warehouse. Dacha Co-op, an attempt to follow this individual storage trend that's becoming overly popular, combining it with the Russian phenomenon of dacha. UVDNH, the exhibition of the achievements of national industries, the most successful exhibition venue of Russia. The territory of the exhibition in the north of Moscow is justly considered to be the most significant cultural, technological, and architectural object in the city. VDNH, initially devised in the end of the 30s as a temporary agricultural exhibition, further on was only growing and expanding alongside Russia, showing the changes of the cultural priorities of the country. This place has not lost its attractiveness even today. In a year, almost 30 million Muscovites visit the place. Within 75 years, UVDNH has been maintaining the viability of the complex, putting together architectural specifics with the unique cultural program and profitability. This is what makes the company unique. There are no exposition complexes like this anywhere in the world. Almost all of them, after the end of the actual initial exhibition, remain unneeded. At the side walls, we tell about the services of УВДНХ: modernization, demodernization, adaptation, and preservation. The right wall describes in detail history of the Cosmos Pavilion, one of the well-known objects of УВДНХ. This pavilion has evolutionized from the exhibition of agricultural techniques through heavy machineries. Now it's a place for parties, and now it has its current state. The actual fair of home plants. The graph on the wall shows the annual growth of the visitors of the complex, with a background of collage and historic images of VDNH at different stages of its history. Yes, this is the video that we forgot when we only built the list of how we're going to present things. So I believe that this is a very good video for the conclusion. We have Pavel here, who probably will continue what I want to say. Out of all projects, it's not just the Providence project, but by 100%, this graph should really hit the sky, because this change of VDNH in the latest years changed from this fair of Chinese goods and crops and home plants into a park that competes for visitors with even Gorky Park in Moscow is again a big step in the development of this object, showing that VDNH is a unique spot which is still essential even today. Pavel, maybe you have a few things to say. Yeah, let me say a few things. First of all, a couple of personal... Yes, my name is Pavel Nefedov. So, when in 2014 Anton found me, I said I'm the key guy on VDNH. I'm an expert on VDNH. But I had no way to prove it. Ever since then, we published a few books, including the guide to VDNH, to big projects. And even 2 years after, fair enough, there's still another Biennale in Venice when VDNH was the theme of the entire Russian pavilion. And there I was as a member of the team that was making the content. So chronologically, everything began here, even though there was no purely an impulse. But nevertheless, it all began there. And indeed, this entire story was created when VDNH presented this gardening fair. But everything that happened later with the territory was not known for us, of course. But let me give you a funny example. One of the examples is Kazakhstan Pavilion. He was there when you saw modernization slide in the video presentation. There was this building with a dome and then modernist black rectangle. And I have to tell you that Kazakhstan Pavilion had a hard time. There were 3 different versions of the pavilion. One, first of them looked like a mosque, it was broken. Then they built something more appropriate, and then in 1954 they built another option with a dome of glass, like a hat. And it was all with this kind of embroidery. And then they turned it into metallurgical pavilion, covered it with black panels, and that's the way we presented it, because in principle we presented there a few trajectories that happened to different buildings of VDNH. And at that pavilion we presented this thing as an example of modernization. But ever since then those panels began falling apart, and it turns out that behind them there are certain traces of the landscape, showing some kind of some of the herdsmen. They recreated, they saw, whoa, this is the actual original pavilion. And then they created these walls with tons of new sculptures and all those embroiderments. Recreated the way we saw it in different kind of stories. So if you ask me who buys these ideas, I'd say that Moscow bought these ideas. Actively using those ideas, because there are so many stories there. the starting point, 1915, not 1967. This relation to modernism in a very precise formula, saying that modernism was kind of a traumatic experience. Now, everything that was happening in 60s and this modernization, violent modernization, looks like a trauma, and we need to rewind from that trauma. And not to mention the fact that it's written on a pavilion now, Republic Kazakhstan, not Kazakh Soviet Republic, but Republic of Kazakhstan, the way Kazakhstan is called today. And the Cosmos Pavilion that you saw here, also, it came back. There is now the Center for Aerospace there now. So this is kind of a sinus graph. So anything that we saw back then as a joke, or as a sort of model that that's pretty ambiguous, is now fully implemented. Dalia, there's something you can say here. Tell about your colossal architectural experience that you have now and working with large corps, and also as a representative of prefab corp in the past. What's happening with panel prefab construction? It's a serious issue. As a matter of fact, a few things about what it's like to be within. If you have 3 curators who were acting themselves, we were performers. We had to act, and every single one of us had a role. So in our mini pavilion, our kiosk, there was a duo, me and Dmitry Zadornov, a beautiful expert who knows everything about panel construction. He's from the city of Minsk. We had different roles. I was kind of a top manager, thank you, and Dmitry was kind of this drunk deputy director. I was drunk, and I was a honey bug, and I was a love bug, and he was a drunk deputy director. And we were reenacting this thing. We were looking at everybody who's coming, and we initially put them into categories. So we had 3 categories of visitors. Those who were simply curious, and we're showing joyfully those 2 collages with happy people and saying, look, millions of people living in our residences, and everybody's happy. There was a second category of people who could immerse into these things a bit deeper, and we were showing them this beautiful wheel, showing them that we can implement any stage that you want. And interestingly, that was based on my research in Strelka a long time ago, and back then when I was doing that research, it was absolutely serious, because I honestly believed that it would be super cool to take those corporations so that would be responsible to utilize their products, reuse those panels, and somehow recycle them. So all of these ideas in a grotesque shapes were on this wheel of fortune. And there was this third category, the heavyweight stakeholders, we call them. And only selected lucky ones could come to this deputy drunk director who took out this accountant calculators from the 90s and asked him what this was. So, what do you want to build? A country or a city? I will help you. So we were telling him the story of either building the entire neighborhood on a scale of a country, doing the same thing and multiplying our beautiful experience in the scale of an entire country, or building cities, turnkey, building this ready-made stores and future recycling. So if back then we believed that this is the reality, this is the trend that's there, and we just put together the entire experience of our country from the Soviet era, and there's no way to go further on, we have put it to the entire grotesque. Now I believe that this pavilion was kind of a premonition. It was an oracle, because the president just had an executive order to build 600 million of residential housing. So I think that the thing that we invented back then, it probably is the only solution to do what President wrote in his executive order. So probably this is the scenario that we have devised back then, reenacted today. So there was a providence. It's a long-term story. Thank you. I believe that today I thought about what would be exciting to talk about today, in addition to everything that we've been talking about already. I believe it would be curious to talk about what the exhibition would be like if we were to do it today, and thinking about knowing what happened. If we were to redesign the exhibition for today, it was in 2014. We decided to do it in 2019. I realized that Prefab Corp is the key story for the exhibition, because the things that happen in the global world of capitalism and in Russia is that this entire spirit of young, active startups that only began back then is now somehow dwindling, because so many startups were bought by large corporations. And that's normal capitalistic process, but the key issue is what companies were bought by Prefab Corp. And it's obvious for me that Prefab Corp would buy Narkomfin that we had there. Narkomfin would just become a standard for Prefab Corp or PIK, Russian developer PIK. And also, this Prefab Corp would either buy or hire the company that's not presented here, but something that's called New Butlab, based on the house, new service house, Dom Byta, called in Russian. Like in Narkomfin, this building provided social access to main household functions. That was a lab. That building was a lab. So Prefab Corp would probably buy this kind of thing or hire those guys. Or this new Byt lab was, again, maybe the prototype of the non-existent back then Strelka KB that has just designed standards for all kinds of territories, construction, and building. And New Butlab suggested doing the same thing back then. The most exciting thing is something that I've just begun thinking about. What was missing? What was missing in the circle of what's happening in the 5 years? One thing, one service is missing. A company, Prefab Corp. It did not provide mortgage. So they would be a bank, but it constructed construction, but not purchase. Because this thing was based on a research in the Soviet Union and in the history of Russia, there was no mortgage. There were different leasing options, but mortgage per se with banks, that did not happen. So I thought, what kind of company could be there? And then I imagined that, and I recalled that actually Prefab Corp initially was called differently when we thought about it. It was called DSK Russia, but they requested us to not to do that because it was too incomprehensible. And long story short, we had this idea to have this Prefab Corp integrate a horizontal, vertical story about this panel construction, but if we thought about it from a different angle, with the idea of mortgage, the closest similarity of DSK Russia would be the Dom RF, actually Dom RF, and this is the company that has appeared, and Dom RF is actually ordering the researches for standards of KB Strelka, for urban improvement, etc., etc. So this is a new kind of a boot lab, like KB Strelka. So thinking about it, I thought, yeah, this would be a very different expo that would criticize different things now and speak about different things. But it would be very exciting, indeed. I want to hand the floor to Yulia, who represents Narkomfin. Last comment, because we're almost out of time, because Narkomfin, I believe, fully justified itself as a Providence kind of project. We know that the house of Narkomfin is being reconstructed now, and soon it will become the real estate to buy And when there were first renders of what's going to be there, I wrote this post about disappointed web post. But I meant that on those renders that I saw that nobody actually felt the imbued aesthetics of that object. It was very standardized, luxury light. But it had to be some specific face. So, as a person who sold Narcofin to the world, yeah, hi everybody. Everybody had a role. Back then, 5 years ago, I was a sweet student according to my role. And as a matter of fact, all of that was a kind of a funny story. All of us could not understand where is this thin line in the seriousness of the thing that we're doing. Because at a certain point, you do realize that people don't get that it's all imaginary. And you also kind of disappear in this thing and you lose the drive of a joke. And at a certain point, was a man with a strong American accent asking, wait, so you are going to sell the idea of reproduction of this thing with only one prototype built over than 70 years ago? How are you going to sell this? That was fun. And in many ways, there's this strange nostalgia. It's like with the books of Vladimir Sorokin. You don't know whether you should rejoice or be scared that there is so much providence in there, to a certain direction. And everything that we have been doing with Narcofin in this or that way, with the spa prisons, etc., it was collectivity for any context. But Dasha, you said that this is a context advertising luxury mid-century apartments. This is really far from what we have been doing. So when we think about it again, I actually realize how odd it was, how much drive there was in it. Briefly. Yeah, we have to wrap up, unfortunately.
Short comment from you, final one.
My comment is that I loved this project and I was super happy to do it and honored to do it, and I love you guys.
Thank you
for being here with us. Thank you for sitting here in the cold and listening to our nostalgias. Thank you for coming. I want to thank Strelka Institute for inviting us to do this long time ago and giving us freedom to do all of it. Unprecedented freedom. I would like to thank Institute Strelka and also thank Varvara Melnikova and all of the employees of the Institute for inventing this discussion and celebrating this 5 years anniversary of the project. And all of this happened thanks to their effort. She was the one who put us together. I think without her, this would never happen. We would never come from Dubai, for example. So, yeah, thank you.